of the bone markings and holes in the skull. So from the front view, in the orbit of the eye, you can see these small holes in the green bone. That's the lacrimal bone with the lacrimal fossa. In the orbit of the eye, you'll see two crevices. There's a superior orbital fissure and an inferior orbital fissure, along with the cylindrical optic canal. Then, below the eye, infraorbital foramen. Above the orbit, supraorbital foramen. Not much of one in the plastic. Here, mental foramen. On the jaw, a couple of the markings. This is the mandibular condyle that touches the mandibular fossa. And then the part that does not articulate, that's pointy, that's the coronoid process. And we had mental foramen. Then here, on the mandibular notch, it's not labeled in your book, but that's a good part. Then from the inferior view of the skull, the bumps, occipital condyles, that's what the skull rests on, C1 or the atlas, and allows you to nod. These are the mastoid processes you feel behind your ear. Pointy ones are the styloid processes. Then the holes. First is foramen magnum. Then we have the holes that lead to the tongue. I don't know if we can see those, but that's the hypoglossal canal. This is where the occipital bone ends, and on either side of where it ends, that's called the base of the occipital. These are foramen lacerum. In a real skull, they'd be very jagged edged. Here is a large one for the vein. That's the jugular foramen. And right next to it would be for the artery, very round. I have students underline the O for carotid, carotid. That's the carotid canal for the artery. So jugular and carotid. In between the two bumps, the mastoid process and styloid process, is the stylomastoid foramen, sort of gummed up there. Then up here, named after its shape, foramen ovale, and next to it, maybe bonus spinosum. Up here, not labeled in the book, incisive fossa. Couple tricky bones. These are the paired palatine bones. This is still maxilla. This is the vomer. That's a singular, one of the two single bones of the face, the other one being the mandible. Then let's look at the superior view. This is the skull with the calvarium removed, the skull cap. You have the anterior, middle, and posterior cranial fossa. Fossa are shallow depressions. Up in this anterior fossa, all of this is ethmoid bone features. The coxcomb, the sharp edge, crista galli. The little plates are called the cribriform plates, and the tiny holes that lead down to the nose are the olfactory foramina. The parts of the bat, that's the sphenoid bone. The parts of this you need to know. The Turk's saddle is sella turcica. Pituitary gland sits on here. We say Ross the cowboy sits on the sella turcica, so if there was a little rider on here, his toe would go up here. R is for foramen rotundum. The heel of the boot goes here. That's foramen ovale. And then the spur, you didn't have to know, is for foramen spinosum. This is the greater wing of the sphenoid bone, and you see just a glimpse of that over here as well. So the inner ear hole, internal acoustic or auditory meatus. Here's another view of the optic canal from inside the skull. Remember, rotundum doesn't go through, so you don't see that on the inferior view. And in these plastic models, the carotid does not go through. So you see the jugular, but there's no carotid. It should go through, but it doesn't in the plastic model. On the back, external occipital protuberance. And the sutures, we could go over those real quick. Connecting the frontal to the two parietals is the coronal suture. Connecting the two parietals is the sagittal suture. Connecting the temporal to the parietals is the squamous or squamosal suture. And then the one that looks like the upside down Y, that's the lambda, so lambdoidal suture. That's it.